I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land which now comprises the municipality of Indigo Shire. We pay respect to their elders past, present, celebrate. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land which now Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land which now comprises the municipality of Indigo Shire. We pay respect to their elders past and present, celebrate and respect their continuing culture, and acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interest of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Apologies and leave of absence. The Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton. His place is being taken by the Manager of Finance, Phil Garoni. Just like to mention that Phil has been with us for 7 years, and he's put in his papers and will be leaving us shortly. I don't generally mention staff members, but Phil Garoni has helped myself, and I'm sure other councillors, with complicated budget issues and financial issues, handling a $32 million budget, and he'll be sadly missed.
Well, I'd just like to echo what the Mayor has said and wish Phil and his family all the best in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Open forum, we have one letter from Jeanette McPetrie. Would you like to read your letter from the rostrum? When I say letters, I mean questions.
Thank you very much. First of all, okay. Thank you very much for, first of all, for allowing the public to come and put forward some questions. So it's much appreciated. First of all, the first one is, what percentage of ratepayer, this is to do with the extension of the Lake Sandball Caravan Park, the Beechworth. So I've got 3 questions. What percentage of ratepayers' funds of the goes towards the 18 million for this upgrade is the first one.
CEO.
Thanks for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I do know you've got 3 questions here, and I do note that this is an agenda item for today, and on the agenda we will be asking council to go out to the community to get community feedback. So some of these questions probably can be covered during that period of question and so on, where you can certainly talk to staff and get some detailed answers on some of these. But I'll try to give you a very broad answer on question 1 and 2 today, if that's okay. The ratepayer fund, the $18 million, when you go into the report and you look at the economic analysis, it talks about certain opportunities at all the caravan parks, that private sector, through private sector expenditure, there's opportunities to improve those caravan parks and create more of an attraction in them. It does suggest that there's a role for council in needing to upgrade some of its basic infrastructure. But what the modelling does show is that with the private sector investment as well as council's upgrading of its infrastructure, that we should see more visitation, we should see more revenue, and hence more of a revenue share to council. And what the modelling does indicate, and long answer, very short, what the modelling does indicate is that any expenditure from council will be more than recouped through increased revenue. So we would expect nil ratepayers funds would be needed as proposed, in that any expenditure would be covered by increased revenue to council. So that would be offset. That would offset that easily.
Yeah, just to reply to that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the net return is about 76,000 per annum, which to me doesn't look to be a very viable business decision of 18 million. But anyway, question 2, will the public walkway around Lake Samble be closed to the community with the proposed boundary extensions of Lake Samble encompassing the walkway in their grounds? It has been noted prior to this date that the public, what I have heard, it's only rumour and third spoken, is that people have in the past tried to have a picnic around the Lake Samble, the pool area, which is not in the grounds at present, and they have been hunted from that area. If that extension is carried out and it goes to the waterway at the entrance of the park where the dump site is, I really fear for the general public to be locked out of that walkway. And I walk that walkway 3 times a week. And there's a lot of people that use that walkway, especially the money and the great job council's done on doing it up. It's fantastic. So it would be such a shame to have that blocked by the caravan park to the public.
You've asked that question, CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, there's no suggestion whatsoever in these documents that any existing walkways will be closed or restricted in any way. But certainly during the exhibition period, certainly make those concerns known, and we'll make sure we address those in the final report. We'll clarify any of those questions that you do have. So,
yep. And the last question is, will there be impact studies done, 2 impact studies? Being a former member of the Chamber of Commerce in the past, I do have a great interest in the local business area. And I'm just wondering, could there be 2 impact studies done? One on the economic loss to the town with having a cafe put in the caravan park. To me, that is a matter of concern. And the second impact study that would be good to be seen of happening is an impact study to wildlife in the surrounding area of the lake, and especially with excess traffic and the extra water activities proposed in that area where there's a lot of ducks and reeds. I don't see it as a great area for swimming to begin with.
So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not really in a position to say in any case whether we can or we can't do any of those things, but certainly again, during the exhibition period, if you'd like to make a submission and suggest those things, and certainly in the final report, then we can address those suggestions at that time.
Okay. And thank you. Thanks very much. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Jeanette. Item 6, community and council achievements. Does any councillor have any comments? Councillor Horn.
I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate Yakandanda resident Ben Gilbert and his team who've taken out the 2022 Australian Institute of Landscape Architects Play Safe Award. Ben, of course, is well known for his work and the creation of his magical 50-metre long red gum and stainless steel dragon. Will pay tribute to the talent and skill of these local craftsmen for generations of children at the Arcadia Estate in Flanagan Street down in Officer. Congratulations to everyone involved in the project.
Thank you, councillor Horn. Item 7, do we have any condolences? Have you got your hand up, councillor Horn? Right, no. All right, item 8, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on 26 July 2022 as published on council's website be confirmed. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by councillor Price, seconded by councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 9, do we have any business arising from those minutes? No. Item 10.1, the petition regarding the relocation of historic carriages. The recommendation is that council acknowledges that the actioning of the requirements of the notice of motion adopted at the July council meeting supersedes this petition. And 2, that council endorses the continuation of the work between the National Trust and council in the endeavours to relocate the carriages collection. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by councillor Tysell, seconded by councillor Croucher. Councillor Tysell.
To the welfare of the carriages that the notice of motion continues, and there have been talks already between council and the trust, and I think that it will do us well to progress. Thank you.
Councillor Croucher.
Now I am. I'd just like to endorse what councillor Tysell said.
I've just got a couple of questions, perhaps for the CEO. In the report where it's got officer's comment on page 7.3, it says, as part of the development of the stage plan, the National Trust has considered the Goodshed as a location and has ruled it out as an appropriate venue. I've certainly spoken to the CEO of the National Trust, and I've spoken to him again today, and he tells me that that's not correct. I'd just like you to make a comment, please.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the comment that's made there is true as we understand it. We believe that to be the case, but I guess in the interest of the report itself, I don't think it has a material impact on what's been discussed today. So I'm happy to defer that, take that comment out and defer that to down the track to see. We are talking to National Trust, we are talking about an MOU with them, and we're talking about appropriate locations. So I think that an appropriate location will be borne out through that process. I'm happy to remove that comment. I still, in regards to the staff putting the comment there, it's true as we understand it, but I'm happy to remove that comment from this report and have the minutes reflect that, Mr. Mayor.
I've just got a second question too on dot point 1. It says relocating the carriage collection to the Goodshed would remove the opportunity for the retail or hospitality business activation at the precinct. Is it true that that Goodshed has been empty for 4 years?
It's true that it's been empty for 4 years, but the works that have been done inside it to improve it are less than 4 years old. But yeah, it has been empty for 4 years. Yeah.
Is there water connected to that shed?
I'm not sure the location of the water connection points there, but so I'm going to take that on notice. I'm not sure where all the water connection status of it is.
Are there toilets at that location?
There's no toilets inside the shed. I know that much. The toilet's nearby.
And the MOU with the National Trust has started. Are you aware that the community are speaking with a benefactor who may establish a rehoming of those historic carriages? And has that information been passed on to the National Trust?
I'm not aware of, I've heard discussions that sound like that. I'm not aware of who the benefactor might be, nor have I discussed any of that detail with National Trust.
There's a good shed at Chiltern which was refurbished by VicTrack, and that's used as a community use only and not to be used for private enterprise. Yet Indigo Shire doesn't wish for this good shed to be used for community use, only for private enterprise. I'm just wondering, why is that? There's been $590,000 spent, 360,000 of that has been ratepayers' money, yet the building has been just left empty for close to 4 years.
So would you mind clarifying with the question component of that? Sorry.
That's right. The good shed at Chiltern was
Yep.
refurbished by VicTrack,
Yeah.
and is for community use only,
Yeah.
not to be used for private enterprise. Yet the Beechworth good shed is not being used by the community, and its use is only for private enterprise. There's been $590,000 spent on that good shed. 360 of that is ratepayers' money.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, is there any likelihood that the community would be able to use that vacant shed, which has been vacant for close to 4 years?
It's probably more of a question for council at a future date than for me to speculate what council might choose to do or not to do. On that one, Mr. Mayor, I think our staff have brought various proposals and suggestions along the way in terms of doing any expressions of interest processes, and with a recommendation that we didn't offer any tenancies in the last process, and the suggestion was that we try again in the future when the market was in a better shape and obviously out of COVID. So there's been no decision made by anybody other than it's there. So that's really a question for a proposal to be put and for a future council to consider that proposal. So I don't think anybody's ruled any option in or out at this stage, or certainly council hasn't.
Do you know when the next expression of interest might take place?
There's been nothing proposed just right at the moment. So I don't have a date for the next one.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
This matter has brought up an unfortunate technicality in that only 156 of the 258 signatures were recognised in this petition because they hadn't followed the proper procedure with including a description of the petition on each page. So I think this has demonstrated the need for us to sharpen out our engagement processes and educate people on how they can engage with us and talk to us.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Tyson. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2. The recommendation is the council notes the petition signed by the 5 business owners in Rutherglen in relation to drainage concerns in Murray Street, Rutherglen, and that council notes that the matter will be investigated as an operational matter, including necessary engagement with the affected land and business owners. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Horn, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn.
This, of course, relates to the severe flooding that the township of Rutherglen sustained in the end of January. And yes, it's a matter of great concern for everybody. So we need to get on and sort it out.
Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Would you like to sum up, Councillor Horn?
Thank you. I was quite interested to see that no assessment had been made at that time. And I wondered if Director Ian Ellett could explain the assessment process and the hold up in assessing that issue.
Director of Infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Horn. I guess the reason there hasn't been an assessment yet on this one is that the correspondence came in to council 4 or 5 weeks ago with a view to it being tabled at a council meeting. I personally am not aware of the issues with those properties before reading it in this correspondence. So I'm aware that we've had widespread challenges across the Shire, particularly the flood event that you mentioned, the storms at the end of January, start of February, and that many properties in Rutherglen were impacted. So look, we have accumulated quite a database, and I'm not across all the detail of various impacted properties and hotspots that we need to work through. But in relation to this one specifically, it's only this correspondence that's brought it to my attention, and I felt the right thing was to present it to council firstly to confirm the direction that we want to take on it. So we'll be able to explore and evaluate the problems from here.
Thank you. Because it's very important to emphasise the impact of the ongoing stress and anxiety associated with the high likelihood of future planning. I've got tongue-tied. Future flooding. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, the recommendation that council accepts the draft financial report for June 2022. Would somebody like to move that motion, that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Croucher, seconded by Councillor Tyson. Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, well, council has completed the financial year on a solid note, and we look forward to the annual report in October when the formal end of the year's financial results will be presented.
Councillor Tyson.
Just second what Councillor Croucher has presented.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.2, the recommendation is the council accepts the July 2022 financial report. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd.
As it's just 1 month report into the financial year, it's very early days, but we're 82,000 favourable on a year-to-date basis compared to the 22-23 budget.
Councillor Price. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.3, the recommendation is the council endorses the attached Indigo Shire Council Planning Scheme translation for the purposes of Amendment VC 148 and supports this document being presented to the Minister for Planning for approval in accordance with Section 24 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tyson, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the planning policy framework will actually simplify the way in which council presents planning issues and at state level, and will hopefully simplify the process for for those who've got planning applications in.
Councillor Price.
This is a really large reform that came about after what do they call it? Sorry. An amendment VC 148. And as Councillor Teisel has explained, it's the aim is to simplify and sort of streamline and so that there's not a replication of what's noted in state frameworks and our local framework as well. So it's been presented to us by our staff and now it will be presented to the Minister for approval.
Councillor Horn.
I'd like to thank Rebecca Moy, our Planning and Statutory Services Manager, for doing this work, which makes the planning scheme easier for the community to understand and apply.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.4, the Project Pinnacle contract decision. The recommendation is that council awards the attached confidential contract to EVIS Proprietary Limited for the provision, licensing and implementation of the planning and building system, Green Light, for an initial period of 5 years with one option for a further term of 5 years according to a schedule of fees outlined in the contract. The maximum cost of the contract for the first year is estimated to be $62,400 GST exclusive, with ongoing annual licensing costs of $40,800 plus GST, with an annual 2% increase in licence fees, resulting in a 5-year contract cost of $233,925 plus GST, and a total cost over 10 years of $468,345 plus GST. 2, the council delegates the following responsibilities to the Chief Executive Officer. A, execute contract documentation. B, authority to exercise the contract extension options upon the expiration of the initial term. And 3, authorised to approve variations up to a total of 10% of the signed contract value. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd.
This is quite exciting, really. That we have $750,000 funding secured with Tawong and Alpine to support the implementation of the building and planning modules across all 3 councils. So we'll be working together, and it's I think it's going to change our planning department, which, can I hear cheers out in the community? So there are many benefits to the new system, and there's a creation of an online portal for applicants to apply for building and planning permits and track the progress of the application, faster processing of applications, easier and faster reporting, and referral authority portal for improved management of referrals. So yeah, I think this is great work. Congratulations, CEO.
Councillor Price.
I think the community would like to hear, as we did as councillors, that why this was the preferred provider as well. And the reasons are listed in the report, that it's a fully cloud-based access, enabling staff to use it from anywhere, removing the need for local technology infrastructure, the very fast system performance, built-in integration to mapping and reporting systems with integration to the new rates property and animal management system, council-wise under development. This particular point, that it's had successful implementation at 14 reference councils in Victoria and 4 in New South Wales, the pricing and reference checking results. So we want to hear that sort of confidence in a system like this before we're on board as well. So I'm pleased that it's been a collaborative effort between 3 councils, and I hope that we see the benefit of introducing it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
I wonder if the CEO could please clarify point 2C, which talks about the authority to approve variations up to a total of 10% of the signed contract value. Can you please explain whether that's the $62,000 annual fee or the total amount?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so that would refer to the total contract amount. So the authority is for me to execute that contract and to approve any variations up to the point at which the total contract may exceed a total variation of 10%.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? You wish to sum up, Councillor Shepherd?
I congratulated our CEO, but I think I need to congratulate all the three management and CEOs of those councils that I know have been working hard to get the funding and to work and to get some sort of platform where they were working together. So they must be feeling pretty happy, I think. So thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.5, the Acting Director, Corporate Services and Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to acknowledge that we actually received communication from the applicant and they've withdrawn this application at this point in time to just pursue further avenues and dialogue with our planning department.
Thank you. Could you just mark that as withdrawn? Thank you. Item 12.1, regarding diversity and inclusion policy, the recommendation is that council endorses the following project plan for the development of a diversity and inclusion policy, noting that a final policy will be presented to council for consideration in early 2023. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Shepherd.
So this was came from the council plan. So to develop an Indigo Shire diversity and inclusion policy. And I think we've been working quite hard in this council to be very inclusive in everything that we're doing. We're trying to, so to have a policy now is going to be, I think, a great thing to have, especially when it's not something that we're legislated to do. We have chosen as a council to do a policy on that. So I think we need to, I think that's an exciting sort of step forward, that we see it's important that everybody in this shire and beyond, of course, feels as though they have a place in our shire and are able to be part of any decision making and anything else that our shire does. So I like the way this policy is going to be done, in the fact that they're setting up a working group of people who are representative, I suppose, of diversity across the area. And they are going to talk about what the important things are, and they will work out what the policy is, and that will then come to us for us to decide. Often it's the officers that work on that, but I'm really pleased to see that there's going to be a working group of people who will give their feedback. So just trying to look who it is. People like Beyond Housing, Mungabarina, Line Wangaratta, Youth Officer and Early Years Officers, Health Services, so and of course council representatives. So a broad section. So I look forward to seeing this policy, and I think we I'd like to congratulate our staff for moving ahead on this.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, I'm also really excited about this work. I think it's always an interesting line that we do roads, rates and rubbish and a policy such as this, but I think it's really important. And as it says, the purpose of the policy is to provide guidance for council to meaningfully work towards equitable inclusion of all community members to participate in our community. And I think that we all generally hope that we can do that, but by working on a policy such as this, it sort of really clearly defines and articulates exactly the areas that we need to work on, And I think that some of our best work always comes with when we network with other groups. And so I'd agree with Councillor Shepherd's comments that I'm really pleased to see the stakeholders on that steering group, because it gives me a lot of confidence that it's starting from a really good place. And so I look forward to seeing the policy.
Would somebody else like to speak to this motion? Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Shepherd?
I just like this statement. It will detail council's commitment to stand against racism, ageism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, intersexism, and against injustices, including economic injustice. It's going to be a powerful policy.
Very well said. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. 12.2 regional jobs and infrastructure grants. The recommendation is the council retrospectively endorses the following project for submission to the 2022 Regional Jobs and Infrastructure Fund. Regional Infrastructure Stream Development of the Tangambalenga Industrial Land Stage 2 project. Total project cost $1,238,571. Regional Development Victoria Grant $990,857. Council contribution $247,714. And that council endorses the council's financial contribution to the project for the 2023-2024 year, should the project receive government funding. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Croucher, seconded by Councillor Tysell. Councillor Croucher.
Yes, Mr Mayor, Kiwa Tangam is one of the biggest growth centres in the Shire and is indeed in need of the development of Stage 2 project of industrial land development. With this in mind, I would like to endorse the submission in the 2022 Regional Jobs and Infrastructure Fund, and if successful, also endorse the council's financial contribution.
Councillor Tysell.
As a former resident of Tangambalenga, we endorse this. It's a rapidly growing town within the Shire, and it would be great for some of those local people to actually have their businesses there as well.
Councillor Price.
I just wanted to note that this is a retrospective endorsement, and obviously our best practice would be that before we submit a grant, it would come to council for approval. And just to note that there's a very good reason why that didn't occur, and that's because with the state election coming up, we're getting some really tight timeframes for applications to be put in. So, and for example, this one opened on the 21st of July and closed on the 17th of August. So we've done well to get an application in that time. I think that's a real credit to us to have something sitting there that we're ready to apply for. And equally, it's only the 30th of August and it's here before us tonight for retrospective endorsement. So I just thought that's worth noting.
Would anybody else? Councillor Horn.
Yes, I think the staff are to be complimented for preparing this application for submission. The proposed project was subject to a very, very tight frame, as Councillor Price has stated. So it's understandable why this retrospective endorsement is necessary. It's consistent with Council's strategic plan for business, industry and community development. And of course, it provides the opportunity to progress the development up in Tangambalanga with a very generous level of support from the government and 4-to-1 funding, meaning the government contributed $900,000 and the Shire $247,000.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Just before you sum up, Councillor Croucher, I'd just like to mention this is not the first time that Indigo Shire Council has partnered with the state government in regard to industrial land at Tangambalanga, and the first one was very was very beneficial in many ways, including financially for the residents of Indigo Shire. And I'd also like to congratulate Mark Florence for this initiative. Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, well, there's nothing much more to say, but I do agree with the first lot of industrial land. That's all full now, so we're desperately in need of new land development for industrial land as well.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.3, Draft Caravan Park Master Plan. The recommendation is the council endorses the draft Indigo Caravan Park Master Plan's documentation ahead of public exhibition during September 2022, and that one endorses the following documents: the Indigo Caravan Park Master Plan Overview, Economic Benefit Overview, Draft Indigo Caravan Park and Master Plan by 4, Lake Anderson Caravan Park, Lake Sambell Caravan Park, Rutherglen Caravan Park, Yakandanda Caravan Park, and 2, notes further targeted stakeholder engagement will be conducted during the public exhibition period, and 3, considers the responses from the public exhibition at the October council meeting. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Tysell. Councillor Goldsworthy.
I had the good fortune to be on the working group for this. It's been a project which I've supported all the way through. I think that camping, glamping, caravanning, on-site cabins is a growing area within our economy, within Victoria and Australia. And that can be witnessed by anybody who's travelling around at the moment with the sheer number of caravans on the road. In adopting this, and if it comes to fruition, it can and will have a significant impact on the economy of the Indigo Shire, where we have the good fortune to have control over 4 caravan parks, all of which are by a body of water of some form. They're very attractive locations, and the current managers of them have done a good job. We want to assist in making our caravan parks even better. It can lead to long-term job increases of up to 61 jobs is the estimate. Over $6 million annually in increased tourism spend in our shires. I note the concern of our earlier questioner around the caravan parks. For a total new investment, it's in the economic impact of $18 million. It would be $12 million of private investment and $6 million of council new investment. The total park revenue would increase to $5.5 million. So it'd be overall very little monetary impact for council ratepayers in the long term. But certainly would receive a long-term benefit. There won't be any proposed changes to the access that the public might enjoy around our caravan parks, and it will certainly rival some of the other parks and your big falls and that sort of thing. We're looking to create a tourism destination in itself. So for that reason, I commend this plan to the councillors, and hopefully we can support it in full. And like when the state government grants available, we'll be able to apply for them and try and boost our caravan parks.
So Councillor Tysell.
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Councillor Goldworthy had to say. And I'd also like to recognise that this is quite an innovative piece of work. Each plan is quite unique to each town, so it's not a one size fits all. And that the questions tonight, I hope we will receive not only those, but we'll receive some more as this goes out to the community, so that the community can actually have an idea and can shape it as well, so that we can work together. Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yeah, I will just add there are some additional documents that came with this that aren't being released to the public. They're commercial in confidence, and yeah, I just emphasise that we're protecting the caravan park managers and their security. So it wouldn't be feasible to do that. And equally with lease agreements and things like that, that's commercial in confidence. So we shouldn't be saying any of that to the public. But the rest of it is a really good read, and hopefully it'll make a significant difference to tourism in our towns.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.4, changing places. The recommendation is that council endorses the Changing Places 2022 funding application for a facility at Martin Park, Chiltern, to be built in the 2023-2024 financial year. And 2, that council endorses the financial contribution of $50,000 to the project in the 2023-2024 financial year, should the project application be successful. Somebody likes Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Price.
I'm really pleased to tell you about this application because firstly, the whole concept of changing places came to myself and Councillor Croucher from the Access Committee, which has been such a valuable resource to us at Council for a long time now. We had a committee member who told us about exactly what a changing place is. And it's, I'm going to get all the language wrong now, but it's a facility, a toileting facility for all ages who might need hoist or lots of extra assistance to use facilities, and hence being called a changing place. We didn't know such a thing existed. The grant opportunities didn't come around very often. And so we discussed it at the Access Committee, and with very receptive officers and staff, had discussions about, that we would absolutely support putting an application in. We did that last year and we were successful in that grant to have one located in Yakandanda. And the funding has been increased and we're applying again this year with the hope of securing another site. There's not many of them in the area, so I think it's really to Indigo Shire's credit to have one. And if we could get a second, I think we'll keep championing these because we know within our towns that it's a balance in lots of our towns between heritage and access. And as a staunch advocate for the Access Committee, we want to tip it the other way sometimes a little bit. So we'd be really pleased to see if this application for Martins Park Chiltern would be successful. So here's hoping, and thanks to the great work of the Access Committee and the officers involved.
Councillor Croucher.
Well, how good is this if this comes to fruition? Because this proposed amenity in Chiltern will certainly complement the Changing Place facility to be built in Yakandanda. To have 2 of these facilities strategically placed in our shire is certainly a bonus, not only for the visitors to our area, but also the people who live in our shire and surrounding districts.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Price? I think it's really good that people with special needs are very special to this council. Okay. Oh, is anybody against the motion? Carried. Thanks. Item 12.5, Living Local Regional Grants Program. The recommendation is that council retrospectively endorses the following project for the submission of a grant application to the 2022 Living Local Regional Grants Program. That the Kiowa River Community Park Activation Project, total project cost $180,000, state government contribution $90,000, council contribution $80,000, community contribution $10,000 in kind. And 2, endorses the council financial contribution to the project for the 2023-2024 financial year, subject to the application being successful. Moved by councillor Croucher, seconded by councillor Horn. Councillor Croucher.
Well. Kiwa Tangambalanga certainly is in the news tonight, isn't it? The community and its surrounds have been wanting public access to the Kiwa River for many years. Kiwa Tangambalanga has the river running right between them, and we haven't been able to get access to that river. Access to the river has now been obtained, but there is a definite need to activate the site, providing a central and accessible point for the community to gather and meet. Therefore, I'd like to endorse the recommendation for the submission of a grant application to the Living Local Regional Grants Program.
Councillor Horn.
Yes, this is a lovely community and they've been waiting for a long time to enjoy this, the natural enjoyment of this area. And it's wonderful to see it going ahead.
Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Price.
I'll just note for the second time tonight that it's retrospective endorsement again, another tight time frame. And I'll say again, because it is worth repeating, that it's a credit to our council and the officers that are able to find these projects that fit these grants and to be able to put an application together, because normally there's quite a lead time with these normally. And we're able to set aside the required time to put an application together. So that takes a lot of work and detracts from their substantive roles that they were doing prior to such a tight time frame. So thank you again to those staff, and I hope that we're successful in this grant for the Kiwa Tangam community.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, nothing more to say, but I agree with endorse what Councillor Price has said. These projects just don't come out of the blue, and it's a credit to the Shire that they're able to get a lot of these grants, and without this ability to be able to get them, we wouldn't be able to have these sort of things. And definitely Kiwa Tangam will be a benefit from this, and the surrounding areas. You're all welcome to come down to the river at any time. Great fishing, great swimming, and a whole lot, Mr. Mayor.
No snakes down. No snakes down there. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1, the Indigo Epic Mountain Bike Trail. The recommendation is that council awards contract number 19200206 Epic Mountain Bike Trail Stage 3 construction to Trailscapes Proprietary Limited for the lump sum of $447,359, excluding GST, and that council authorises the CEO to execute the contract documentation. And 3, the council authorises the CEO, the financial delegation, to approve contract variations up to a total of 10% of the signed contract value. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
To echo Councillor Shepherd's words from earlier, I'm excited about this. Look, primarily this is the third stage, and it will lead to the completion of the Epic, the Indigo Epic Mountain Bike Trail. All going well, it'll be completed by December. And we'll see undoubtedly a large influx of people to visitors, mountain bikers to our towns. Hopefully that will lead to a large economic increase locally as well for our local hoteliers and accommodation providers, cafes and the like. So the Trailscapes Proprietary Limited are currently working on stage 2. They'll be in a position, all going well, to, if this is adopted tonight, to move straight from stage 2 onto stage 3, which will see a timely completion of the Indigo Epic. We're in a fortunate position that this will be the only all-weather, all-year-round epic mountain bike trail in Australia. To qualify to be an epic, you need to be more than 32 kilometres in length, and we've got that and some. I think we'll see significant increase in tourism as a result. So I commend this to my fellow councillors.
Councillor Shepherd.
I read a couple of articles recently, one on Facebook and one I think from the council, from mountain bike magazines lauding the how amazing this is going to be. And the one on Facebook was shared so many times that I just, in the end, I gave up with people saying, Daryl, we must come to this. And I ended up stopped scrolling. But I thought, gosh, of all these people who are sharing and following this and saying they must come turn up, it's going to be a pretty busy space. The interesting thing about this trail is it's also not only for the experts, which means all those lycra lads. I know there's a lot of women out there as well at the moment. And it's meant to have trails for beginners as well. So that was one of the things that I was pretty keen about when we first did the discussion about it. So look forward to for this being finished and being open and see what happens. Might get up there.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Horn.
I have a question. I noticed in the design that lots of the area is one way. How does that work with people using the track?
Happy to answer that if you like.
Sure.
It's a figure 8 design, so it's designed to go exactly that. Predominantly down one way and up the other, so that they don't crash into each other.
You're in back at the same place.
You can, or I'd suggest a lot of people will probably end up at Yakandanda and partake in something there and then go an uplift.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I've just got a question for the CEO without notice. We got a federal government grant of $1 million in 2019. Will this project be completed on budget or expected to be? Not accounting for the 10%, but yeah.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So the original budget was the $2 million budget, $1 million from ourselves, $1 million from the federal government. And we see no reason, and as we approach the final stages of the project, we see no reason to be looking for any overruns. We're not aware of any. This large stage has now been tendered, so that gets us pretty close to locking in a final result. So there's no sign of an overrun.
Excellent. Councillor Horn.
That being so, could we perhaps expect some savings being made elsewhere if this contract runs over budget?
I think she means under budget.
Under budget.
What I'm
sorry.
saying to you is that we will expend the budgeted amount. We're not expecting to go over on this particular project. Nice try, councillor.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yeah, just to mention the Australian mountain bike review that was done by Georgina von Marburg. She's Aubrey lass, and she's previously worked for mountain biking companies, and yeah, so it's getting plenty of good exposure already. So this will be big. I think people will be surprised how big.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.1, governance rules. The recommendation is the council adopts the governance rules 2022 review as attached. 13.2. The recommendation is the council notes the July Capital Works report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Councillor Tyson, do we have a seconder? Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that despite a fair bit of inclement weather, Indigo Shire is still delivering on the projects, and that we should deliver on everything as it's been done in timely manner. Although we have had issues with the Chiltern Hub, but they will certainly be met as we go forward.
Councillor Shepherd.
It's great to see that we received a grant to extend the museum's 19th century taxidermy display cabinetry, fully grant funded, 89,900. So And it will also support an installation of a CCTV system across the precinct. Because we include over $4.5 million worth of objects, such as Ned Kelly's death mask, Robert O'Harsberg's pistol, and 150 First Nations objects. So I thought that was great to see. I'm also interested in whether our Director of Infrastructure could just talk us through the EV charging for council funding that we received. I know we had a bit of discussion, why couldn't the community use it? Why is it low voltage? Yeah, I think it probably better come from you.
Thanks, Councillor. Look, I'll do my best. I'm not right across the details of the grant, but I understand that the grant that has delivered us these 7 electric vehicle chargers has a condition on it that these aren't for public. These are for council's fleet. Clearly, what's behind that is to try and, I suppose, motivate the government sector to be a leader in taking up electric vehicles. Of course, Indigo Shire have already progressed down that path of our own, I suppose, initiative. But a lot of councils don't have any EVs, and so I guess you can look at this and say, look, it's a motivating form of or incentivising form of grant funding to help councils make this a bit more mainstream and to see more EV charging stuff out in our community. Will certainly help us just get around the Shire with the EVs that we've got, and I'm sure we'll add to our fleet in the coming time. So hopefully that gives a snapshot, Councillor.
Thank you. Also, can I just question without notice? I know Yakandanda's just got a first public EV charger, but there will be more public EV chargers. One's for Beechworth, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. That's another grant funded one. So council's not the grant recipient of that. The EV network, and I think there's 55 they're putting in towns across regional Victoria. So that's a fast charge unit. I think it's 50 kilowatts. And yeah, so there's one to go in Beechworth in addition to that community one that you've just mentioned in Yakandanda, and I'm sure we'll see more.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
I'd like to ask a question, please. The Director, Ian, it's been reported to me that the Capital Works Monitor for the end of the financial year hasn't been presented. Can you talk to that, please?
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor. That is correct. We haven't done a June one. We didn't get a report to the July meeting for a couple of reasons. We had staff sick, and also we always find July, unlike the other months, there's a lot of end of year stuff, a lot of adjustments. The numbers are probably a little bit variable, still being finalised. So look, we could have brought it through this month. Instead, what we thought we would do is there will be an end of year wrap up on a range of things. So our achievements against council plan and the like. So we thought that would be the appropriate time to bring a year in review from Capital Works. So I think I'll liaise with the CEO, but if it doesn't come through to September, which probably no reason it can't, but if we want to align it, we'll just make sure it comes through with the other like things. So if it's not September, it would certainly be October.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Tyson? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. 14.1, Governance Rules Review. The recommendation is the Council adopts the Governance Rules 2022 review as attached to come into effect at the close of the schedule of Council meeting today. And that Council provides appropriate communication to the community about the options for asking questions of Council, and B, the availability of minutes for community asset committees. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Goldsworthy.
It's always good to have the governance rules that reflect our current practices. They've been varied a little bit. I think it is important in relation to petitions we get it right. I note that the first petition on the agenda tonight had multiple signatures from people outside of our shire. It's just good to get a handle on where people are from. I noted that there was a couple of signatures that signed more than once. So it is good to have the rules in place so that we can reflect and control our meetings appropriately.
Councillor Croucher.
Yes, when I first joined council 12 years ago from a teaching position, the two words that I learnt were infrastructure and governance. And that word is continually mentioned so many times throughout my days and nights on the council. I can see they how very, very important governance is, and as Councillor Goldsworthy said, and I've learnt lots of things such as conflicts of interest and all of these sorts of things as far as the word governance is concerned. I'd like to congratulate the people that did the work on this, because I think there's been a lot of work going into this, and just quote the conclusion that says the proposed government rules are consistent with the Local Government Act 2020, new ministerial guidelines and current and proper practice.
Councillor Horn.
Could I just ask a question without notice of our governance officer to explain the steps taken to improve the issues like with the petition?
Yes, I'm happy for you to.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, councillor. When we were doing the governance rules, we were concurrently receiving a number of petitions. We don't want petitions to go to waste all of that effort. So we've developed a much more plain English resource on the website to explain to people how petitions are formulated and what will make them compliant. And we provided a template as well. And we always encourage members of the community to get in touch with us if they're not sure how to go about it.
Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.2, the recommendation is the council endorses the draft Public Transparency Policy 2022 review for public consultation for a period of 30 days. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Councillor Price, seconder. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Price.
This is a requirement of the Local Government Act 2020. And so this will be our second iteration of this policy. It's always a topic of conversation within the community, them expecting a high level of transparency. And so I hope that those people would engage with the public transparency policy and provide us some feedback. There have been some changes, but they're small and they're just to reflect, as it says in the conclusion, the intersection of various legislation and council policies and represent an improvement to the policy. So as the Mayor said, it will go out to the public for 30 days now.
Councillor Shepherd. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.3, delegation to the CEO from council. It's reasonably lengthy, but I will read it because it may be taken the wrong way by some people. But the recommendation is that council, in the exercise of the power conferred by section 111B of the Local Government Act 2020, resolves that there be delegated to the person holding the position, acting in or performing the duties of the Chief Executive Officer, the powers, duties and functions set out in the instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer, subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument as attached. 2, that the instrument comes into force immediately upon resolution being made. 3, on the coming into force of the instrument, all previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer are revoked. And 4, The duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed, and the powers set out in the instruments must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of council that it may from time to time adopt. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd. We have a seconder, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd.
I'll just, I think, refer to the discussion that a number of Victorian councils have identified and addressed in recent months a potential gap in the standard template, providing a financial delegation to a CEO, in that it does not necessarily articulate the disbursement of statutory monies collected and held temporarily on behalf of other authorities. So monies like the fire service, property levy, payroll, superannuation, taxation, EPA levy, WorkSafe. And while they don't necessarily constitute expenditure and are required under the various governing acts, it would be prudent to include a clause in the instrument of delegation to the CEO to refer to these payments. I think that's a nice succinct explanation of what we're doing here.
Councillor Goldsworthy. No, so it's something that's been happening for a long time. The distribution of that money, such as the fire levy, which is collected by the rates and then forwarded on to the state government. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.4. The recommendation is in the exercise of the powers conferred by Section 224 of the Local Government Act 1989 and other legislation referred to in the attached instruments of appointments and authorisation. Indigo Shire resolves that the member of council staff referred to in attachment 1 be appointed and authorised as set out in the instrument. And 2, the instrument in attachment 1 comes into force immediately upon resolution of council and is revoked on the date the officer ceases employment or until council determines to vary or revoke it. We're talking about an instrument of appointments and authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Somebody would like to move that recommendation? Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Price.
We're just welcoming, we're welcoming another planner, and that's a role that council has to take through. As the mayor said, that the appointment under the Act. So that's what we're doing here.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
Welcome, Josh.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.5, the revocation and redundant policies. The recommendation is the council revokes the following policies: contributory schemes for local roads, footpaths and drainage policy; 2, rural road infrastructure contribution policy; 3, councillor discretionary fund policy; Indigo Shire Council community loans policy; interim car parking policy; plant equipment and fleet management policy; land sale or exchange pricing policy; recreation vehicle policy. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Well, there's an old proverb that I've quoted before: never tear down a fence unless you know why it was built. I hope we know why our policies were put in place, and I hope it's right to remove them.
Councillor Croucher.
There's always a need to update and to maintain policies. It's something that I learned in the education department lots of times. And there is sometimes a need to revoke out-of-date policies. And I think this is spelled out in this resolution recommendation.
Would anybody else? Councillor Price.
I'm happy to do more than hope. As it says in the report, the governance team in their role of making sure they're across all of the different policies that we have at council, they needed to review policy management process across council, and these were identified. And it means that they're redundant for a number of reasons. It might be that there's a process that's used, and it makes the policy redundant, or it's been absorbed into a different policy. So I'm more than hopeful. I'm confident that this has been a thorough process, and happy for these to be revoked.
Councillor Shepherd.
I'm really pleased to see us taking some off the list because we keep adding so many. But I'm also really keen, since I've been on council, I've been really, like, some of them come up in their 2007 policies, and I think, how's that still relevant and why haven't we updated it? So there's been a lot of work being done recently on knowing what policies we've got, getting them up to speed, reviewing them, and it's great to see that we're slowly getting our policy agenda together.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.6, contracts awarded under the Chief Executive Officer delegation, nil. Item 14.7, recommendation is the council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes, and 2 notes that no recommendations are reported for council decision. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Horn. Councillor Price.
So these are the minutes of 3 meetings, but in particular, I'd like to note the Access Committee minutes from this month. In this month, we had 3 visitors from Wodonga Council come and speak to us so that we could talk about what our access committees look like and try and, learn from some of the different things that they do and vice versa, sort of create linkages between our 2 councils. We do a lot of things better than them, and we have much more scope in our access committee than they do and far less resources. So we're doing really well in that regard. We were envious of them though when they had an access issue in the main street of Wodonga without any heritage restrictions. They just ripped it up. They just ripped up the whole main street and just took away all of the access issues that were there. And so we could never do such a thing, which, I mean, that's why we love our towns, but it did seem nice to dream to be able to get rid of all of those access issues in one fell swoop. So thank you to those staff for coming across a meeting with us. And as I say, we had 3 staff sitting there representing the one role that we have at Indigo. And so we all reflected on the fact that we have such a great officer in Kate O'Toole and manager in Carleen Lamana who oversee that committee.
Councillor Horn. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.8, informal meetings of councillors' records. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillor records. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Croucher, seconded by Councillor Tysell. Councillor Croucher. Councillor Tysell. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 15, notices of motion nil. Item 14, for information only, the Mayor's diary. Item 0.7, for information, the decisions register. Item 18, general business. Councillor Goldsworthy.
I'd just like to note that in about 2 weeks' time, it'll have been 2 years since Parks Victoria decided to close the track just near the Silver Creek Caravan Park that runs through to the back of the Lake Sample Caravan Park. It's called the Silver Creek Walking Trail. We just request that contact is made with Parks to see where they're at with it and if there is ever an intention to open that trail again and perhaps provide some maintenance on it.
Have you made a note of that? Governance officer. Do we have any other general business? Councillor Tysell.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of items that I'd like to bring up. The first is the solar farms development around Barnawatha. One of the concerns there is the fact that Barnawatha is a growing town and that these could potentially, especially if we add more, landlock Barnawatha. Once these are established, they're not removable and they do take up valuable farming land as well as land that could potentially be used later on down the track for further subdevelopment. So I don't know as much we can do about it, but I would like to note it. The second is, as energy costs rise, we have more and more people, as witnessed by a article in the Boredom Mail, with people going into our forests and private properties and removing firewood. And I was just wondering, is it possible that we could advocate for a registry of people who at least provide information about where they are buying, purchasing their firewood or sourcing their firewood if they are selling it commercially?
Do we have any other general business? No. Under section 19.1, this is regarding confidential business. Item 19.1 is considered to be confidential under section 3(1)(f) of the Local Government Act 2020, as it deals with personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. Therefore, the recommendation is that the council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020. Somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close the meeting for confidential purposes. Recommendation is that council moves out of confidential session. Moved by councillor Price, seconded by councillor Croucher. Is anybody against that recommendation? We are now back in open council. I'm now declaring this council meeting closed at 7:55 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.